built the foundations at Anfield for a dynasty which would dominate football long after his death. Among the disciples who followed the Shankly philosophy was Scottish striker Ian St John. A Liverpool church once put up a poster outside reading, "What would you do if Christ returned to lead us?" Underneath, with typical Liverpool humour, someone had scrawled, "Move St John to inside right." In Liverpool, football's almost a religion. You're either blue or red, and Ian St John was most definitely a red. This is his story of how a boy from the Motherwell Steelworks came to Liverpool and linked up with the likes of Ron Yates and Roger Hunt during the Shankly years.
Well, I was born in Motherwell, 1938, so it was the start of the war, and by the time you become aware of my memories, the war was finishing, and I remember when it finished, everybody out in the streets singing, and the lights went on again for the first time. So it was wonderful for us because during the winter months we could play a bit of football under the light, which was, floodlight football. It was terrific because during the war years, obviously the blackouts and whatever, the kids at night were all indoors. But so we were out in the streets again, and it was wonderful. And that was where everybody played their football in those days. All the lads played out in the streets because there was no traffic. The only traffic up our street would be the milkman's horse and cart as he was delivering the milk and whatever. And sometimes the horse would damage the pitch a bit. We'd get the shovels out and clear the road and then commence with the game. So we'd play in the streets and play in our back gardens, back courts, as it were. But that was when all the youngsters, during that particular period in British life, used their imagination for football. We would play little games. If you were out first in the morning, you'd knock the ball against the wall and, do little heading game against the wall with yourself, going for your record, keeping the ball going. Then your mate would turn up, right, great, so it's 1 against 1, you may have a heading game or a little passing game or whatever. Somebody else turns up, so it's 2 against 1, you're in goal till we score, and then we change over. And somebody else 2v2s. And you build up until, any amount of people would be there at the end, and we would play our games. And it was all fantasy. You were Scotland-England games, and you were your favourite player, and it was great. And it was all these little skill games that you played. You didn't know at the time, obviously, but that was you honing your game for later on when you start playing the game at a very high level. And it was great, and I thought it was wonderful. Just loved it. I mean, times were hard, of course they were hard. My mother was a widow with 6 kids, and we really had to. We were living in a room and kitchen, and it was hard times. But funny enough, when you look back on it, it never seems as bad because everybody else in the street had problems, obviously, with families after the war, and everybody was, skint. There was no money around, but you just were happy because the place was full of kids, and everybody enjoyed it. And then when I left school at 15, Motherwell was a steel town, and everybody went in the steel works. That was the time when jobs were available in the steel industry. So I would go into the steelworks the same as everybody else, a 15-year-old. But the first job I got was not quite in the steelworks. I was working in a coach building firm, and the contract for making these ambulances, and it was right behind the Motherwell football ground. And I used to, jump over at the wall and see the players training when I should have been working. And I mean, that wall, I knew that wall ever so well because as a kid, I used to go over the wall to watch the team play on Saturdays. I got caught once, and the police, got me with a scruffy neck and threw me out, but I just went round to another part of the wall and got over again. There was a school, and you go over the school playing field and then over the wall. It was dead easy. And in fact, I remember one Sunday morning, we went up, 2 or 3 of the lads, and we would climb the wall, and we were on the pitch, playing football on the pitch, and the old groundsman came out, who I later got to know, obviously, when I went to the football club, an old guy called Will Walker, and he roared, come out the tunnel, get off the pitch! Well, we legged it back over the wall again, got our ball, and off we went. But that was me getting a game at Motherwell as I was a kid. But then, as I say, working in the steelworks and the coach building, I had just no interest at all in it. But one of the lads was trying to learn me to drive. I'm only 15-year-old, but I'm saying, show me how to drive. So he was learning me on these coaches out in the yard, and I thought, I'm not bad at this. So one day I got in. I said, I'll move this ambulance. So here's me thinking I'm putting it into first gear, and I stuck it in reverse. Vroom, bang, the whole door caved in, brand new ambulance, just off the line. Caved in the back door, so the gaffer got hold of me. Then to see the boss, right son, sacked. So that was me out of there. but straight into the steelworks, the Colvilles. And the problem was then that you had to go on the shifts, 6 to 2 shift in the morning, 2 to 10 in the afternoon, or the night shift. And so we would do the shifts. And I liked the night shift because, again, if the mill, they were rolling all the steel in the mills, and if the mill broke down, which happened a lot, then we would just be sitting around and we'd play football again during the night, the big lights in the steelworks. So we'd get the ball out and have a few games. And that was me then around the 16-year-old. So I was playing football with my boys' brigade team as a kid and my school team. And then when I went into the senior school, obviously playing away there. And just gradually, you were playing around and people were saying, he's not a bad wee player. And I joined a boys' club team called North Motherwell. And they were a terrific team. I have to say, an old boy called Pat McCourt was our boss, but he ran the team. And it was great. And it was the first time really I'd got into a team that had a wee bit of discipline about the club, a bit of pride in the club. And I thought it was just wonderful. So I'm playing away with the boys' clubs, and I got a bit of recognition then. I got selected for the Scottish boys' clubs. And I'd never been selected for my school area. I'd never played for the area team or the Scottish schoolboys, because they were all... The Scottish schoolboy team, I went to see them play an international, was played at Motherwell's ground. And they were so strong-looking, big boys, and I thought, looking at myself, I was a little titchy fella. And I thought, blimey, the size of these lads. But funnily enough, most of them never ever made it in professional football. They reach a peak around 15 and then very few of them ever go on, whereas the rest of us are all just maturing gradually. So I played with the boys' club team against Wales, and Ronnie Yates, who was later to be my big buddy at Liverpool, my captain at Liverpool, my roommate for 10 years. Big Ronnie was the captain of the boys' club. And it was so funny that the size of Ronnie as a boy, I mean, he was huge. His jersey, the sleeves were they were like short sleeves for him, supposed to be long sleeves, but he was that big, they were like short sleeves. So Ronnie played, and a boy called John McPhee, who was my boys' club team, who later signed with Motherwell, same as me. And John actually was my best man at my wedding. So we were playing with the Scottish boys' clubs, and we played against Wales over at Airdrie's ground, and we won the game. And so that was me a little bit of recognition. And then I went from there to what we call in Scotland junior football, which is a semi-pro league that they've got there. And it's a great grounding because it's some old pros that have maybe come down who are on the last legs, as it were, or boys who didn't quite make it in the pro level, and they come down, and young lads who are on the way up. So it was a very good breeding ground. It was a good league, and it also lends you to look after yourself for the first time you're playing against men. So you're turning from just boys football into playing against men, and it's a tough league, so you learn how to look after yourself. If you didn't, then obviously you didn't make the grade. And Motherwell had at that time spotted me, the scout had spotted me playing with the boys' clubs and had asked me to go up training. So we went training at night, a couple of nights a week. Now, that was me then getting in the Motherwell ground, into the dressing room and training with some of the part-time pros. A lot of them were part-time actually in those days. So training with part-time pros. The team that I had supported as a boy, I followed Motherwell from I was first ever went to a football match. And all my heroes at that particular time, the team that won the cup, 1950, I can rhyme them off now. Johnson, Kilmarnock and Shaw, Coxbane and Redpath, Sloan, Humphreys, Kelly, Watson and Aikenhead. Now I ended up playing with some of those guys and I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it when I was up training and there I'm in the dressing room and I'd walk in some of these fellas and they'd think, yeah, they were your heroes. And you're stripping with them and then you're maybe having a little kick about behind the stand because that's what they used to do then. I mean, training was useless at the football clubs then. They would just run you around the track and run you up and down the terrace and then you might get a little kick of a ball behind the stand after and that was it. But what it was doing, it was giving me my first insight into professional football. So I was hardly a season with the juniors when Motherwell said, right, we'll take you as a pro. So they signed me as a pro, part-time pro, because at this time I'm still working in the steelworks. I'd moved from one steelworks to another, supposedly to get a trade. I was going to be a fitter. So I moved to the Motherwell Bridge and Engineering Company as a fitter. And people who worked there would tell you that, I mean, they never saw me. Because I used to clock in the morning and then I would hide. And I'd clock out again at night and people never saw me. For years, I was there for 5 years. People never saw me. I used to jump the wall and go to the movies in the afternoon. And then later on, when I was playing with Motherwell, I would jump the wall and go up to the ground and say to the manager, well, you know, I've got time off from work to train. And he never knew what was going on, so I would train with the full-time players and then go back and clock out at night. I mean, it was terrible what I was doing, but I just hated being in the steelworks. But I had to do it because, you know, they said, you've got to do it for 5 years. And also, one of the reasons I did stay in the steelworks was to stay out of the army. Because when you were 18, you automatically went into the army, unless, of course, you had a trade. And if you had a trade there, you didn't go until you were 21. And so I'm staying in my trade to avoid going in the army. And we also heard that they're eventually going to stop the call-up just around that period when I would be finishing my time, you see. So I was my fingers crossed, and I thought, oh great, you know, I don't have to go in the army. But it just so happens that there was only a couple of months to go, so I got the call-up to go in the army. And I was married. I got married when I was 20-year-old. My wife was only 18. And within a year we had a child, my daughter. So there was me at that age, 21-year-old. I'm married with a child and I've got to go in the army. And of course I'm playing with Motherwell at the time. I was playing for Scotland. I'd been picked for Scotland. So I thought, I can't go into the army. And I went into Glasgow for the medical. And I'd broken my wrist when I was playing one of the games at Motherwell. And the manager said, now remember, tell them about your bad wrist. I said, I will do. So we go and I do the whole medical bit. And I don't know, people who go and get the medical to go in the army at that time, the tests they give you, and they're so simple, you think there's a catch. They were so simple that, you know, they'd give you little adding ups to do and little subtractions and little spelling things to do. And they were so simple that I thought, there's got to be a catch in this, you know, there's something in this I can't see. And I was baffled by it. And the reason was that they just wanted anybody in. You know, you could have been the biggest imbecile in the world and you were going in the army. There was no way you could fail this test. So I do the test, but when it came to the medical, I said to the doctor, look, I've got this broken wrist and it's never healed properly. Yeah, okay, fine. Pass. Great. He said, you're in and you're going to take over Johnny White's job. John White was a pal of mine who, people remember him from Tottenham Hotspur. He got killed playing golf, John, playing for Spurs, and him and I had made our debuts together for Scotland. Johnny White, he was a wonderful player, but he had this job in the army, the KOSBs down at Berwick, and they said, John White's moving off out of Berwick and you're getting his job. So I went home and I said to my wife, you'll never believe this, I'm in the army. So she's in tears. See me away for 2 years. So she said, you better go and tell the manager. So I went up to the club and I said, Mr. Ansell, I said, I'm in the army. He said, what about your wrist? I said, well, I told them about my wrist, but they said, I'm still in and I'm going down to Berwick. So he wrote a letter, got hold of the specialist, who then wrote a letter for a recall medical. So I've got this letter, I go back to Glasgow like a week or so later, present the letter to them, and they went, yeah, okay, fine, grade 3, you don't have to go. And what a relief not to go in the army. When I got called up to play in the team, the Motherwell team, for the first time, I was in the reserves. I was getting £6 a week, which was quite a bit of money in the sense I was getting about £4 working in the steelwork. So the £6, I was quite well off then. So I had a few quid in my pocket, as it were. And we only got £20 to sign on as well. So there was 20 quid to sign on. I gave my mother a tenner. I had a tenner. I bought a suit with it, a shirt and everything. I mean, it was great what you could do with the money in those days. But the team that I started playing with at Motherwell were all young lads. The manager had done a very good job in getting a lot of young players from around, boys from Edinburgh, Glasgow. And we became the best footballing team in Scotland. We were known as the Ansell Babes. We were all young lads. We all got in the team early. I first got in the team when there was a bit of a flu epidemic at the club, and somebody came down to the steelworks and said, you've got to go up to the football club, you're going with the team tonight down to play against Queen of the South. It was a League Cup game. in the early part of the season. He said, the lads have got flu at the club, so I went home, got washed, up to the club, got the team bus, and off we went, and I got picked for the game that night and I played. And that was me in the team, and I never got out of it. Along with other young lads that were coming into the team, Billy Hunter, Pat Quinn, Andy Weir, who's now deceased, poor Andy, and a little boy called Sammy Reid. And that was us. We were all the same height near enough. I was about the biggest, and I'm like about 5'7.5", and we're all playing there, and the football was just magic. Hunter and Weir as wingers, but brilliant wingers. Pat Quinn could put the ball through, that hole that you could think a ball would never go through it. You could slide it through. Little Sammy would snap up chances. And I was getting goals presented to me, and I couldn't believe it. I scored the fastest hat-trick in Scotland, 2.5 minutes for a hat-trick. I scored 6 goals against Flamenco Brazil. We beat them 9. They were over touring in Europe. We played them. Scored 5 goals in the Scottish Cup tie. I was just scoring goals. I couldn't stop scoring because these lads were so good. The balls were flying in from the wings, and Pat would stick them through the middle and just run through and score. And I was the leading goal scorer in Scotland, so I got picked for the under-23 team, got picked for the Scottish League team, and then I got picked for the big team, for the Scottish national team. And again, funnily enough, my first game for them was a bit like the Motherwell thing. We were training, the under-23 team used to go with the big team down to Turnberry for 3 days, and we would be training with the big boys. Tommy Docherty and all these guys were playing in the team then. It was great. It was a smashing few days. We were staying at Turnberry in lap of luxury. But on the morning of the game, we were playing West Germany at Hampden on a Wednesday night. And the manager came to me in the morning, and I'd been running around with all the younger players playing away there at training, and he said, "I want a word with you." He said, "A boy called Andy Kerr, the centre forward from Partick Thistles, pulled out." He said, "I'm going to play you tonight." So that was me on the day, and I thought, "Oh, I've been running around, I've maybe used up all my energy." So we go up to Hampden Park, and Johnny White was making his debut, and there was 2 other boys, Andy Weir from Motherwell and Bert McCann from Motherwell was also playing, being selected. So it was a proud moment for the Motherwell club, having 3 players playing, and we played the game, and we beat West Germany 3-2, and I had a good game. There was a headline in the Scottish papers the next morning saying, "St John and White made the future bright," and that was lovely, to look back on that. So I then became a regular player in the team for a number of years, along with Dennis Law and Johnny White. I mean, great players, Baxter and Kerr, Billy McNeil, Willie Henderson, Davy Wilson. I mean, we had a super team, Scotland. But typical of Scotland, they never realised it. And at that time, the manager never picked the team. The selectors would pick the team. And the manager, whoever he happened to be at that time, had just got what he got and said, "Well, there's your team." They just do a little bit of training, and that was it. So these selectors would change the team, and they would drop. I mean, even Dennis was left out of the team, and various people would left out. Dave Mackay would be left out, play some, and then leave him out. So nobody really knew where they stood. It was just a shambles from these selectors. And I was left out of, in 65, we'd drawn 2-2 against England at Wembley, and I'd got the second goal. And then they had a tour party going somewhere, and I was not in it. So I had a go at the press at the time, in the press, about these selectors. Said they were clowns, you should be Ken Dodd and the Palladium and the whole thing. All the things that you see young players doing now, spouting off in the press, and you think, don't do that. Well, I did it, so we all learn by our mistakes, don't we? And I said, I don't care if they ever pick me again for Scotland. And they never. So that was my international career all over. 21 caps, and I finished in 1965. Some of my best memories about that Scottish team were the matches against England, and it's such a pity now that we don't have the Scotland-England matches because they really were a bit special. We used to have 134,000 up at Hampden, and then 100,000 at Wembley, where all the Scots would save up for a couple of years, come down and have a marvellous time. But there was one year where they didn't have a marvellous time, and that was the year we lost 9-3. Now, to this day, all the Scots who played in that game, and I was one of them, have nightmares about that. But I'll tell you a little story that always comes back to me about that game. We were doing quite well. We went in at half-time 3-2, and having been 3-0 down and fought back to 3-2, we were quite chuffed in the dressing room. Frank Haffey was our goalkeeper from Celtic, and it has to be said that Frank was the third choice goalkeeper because Billy Brown from Tottenham was injured, Laurie Leslie from West Ham was injured, and Frank was the only other goalkeeper we had, and Frank got the game. Now, some people blame Frank Haffey for the 9 goals, but I don't. I think maybe 7 or 8 of them, but I certainly don't blame him for the 9. But the turning point this whole game was we're in the second half and 3-2, and we're getting back into the game, and we haven't got the 2 goals back. The crowd were going, Scots were all saying, this is it, we can get a draw here. Free kick just outside our box. So the ball had been kicked away, and we're lining up our wall just inside the box there. It was almost central to the goal. Well, the ball arrives from where it gone out to play back, and who picked it up but one James Greaves. So Greaves got the ball in his hand, and we're all standing where this kick should be taken. Greaves, who was like about 10 yards or more to the right hand side of this wall, just put the ball down and rolled it to little Douglas from Blackburn Rovers, Brian Douglas, who ran into the box and put it in the net. So everybody looked at the referee, and he blew for a goal. It was a Frenchman. And he ran to the centre circle, chased by the whole Scottish team. Dave Mackay, Dennis Law, everybody were all after him. And how nobody strangled the referee, you'll never know. But that was little Greaves. He just put the ball down, stuck it to Douglas, in the net, bum. 4-2. And unfortunately, that was the floodgates opened then. And poor Frank, he couldn't have caught the cold that day. And the balls just kept flying in, and it was just, an utter nightmare. But 2 years later, we went back, and we were playing away there, and Bobby Smith broke Eric Caldo's leg. Now, Eric Caldo was our left back. Got taken off. No substitutes, of course, in those days. So we were playing England with 10 men. And Jim Baxter was playing with us. Now, Jim Baxter was just a class player. Real class act, Jim. So confident. Just got the ball, used it well, walked past people. He had no pace, Jim. Couldn't tackle. He was a great player. Very like Bobby Moore, what people would say about Bobby Moore. He had all these deficiencies, but was probably one of the greatest defenders in the world. So Baxter, in this particular game, it was going to be his game, Jim. We got a penalty kick. Baxter, I'll take it. Never took a penalty before. I'll take it. Bump, knocks it in. Banksy was a goal for England. Stuck it past him. And then he scored another goal, drove one in. And we won 2-0. Now, it was absolutely fantastic that Scotland should win that game with 10 men. And I know later on Scotland had a great result again in 1967 with Billy Bremner and all the lads on the team there. But I think that result was the best in the history of Scottish football. To win the game with 10 men, I thought it was just incredible. All the outfield players who played in the 9-3 game look back on it as the worst result ever. But could you just imagine how Frank Haffey must have felt? And he was a goalkeeper. He's the last line of defence. He's the man that got blamed for the 9 goals. Now, Frank, not long after that, went to Australia. Now, we don't know if he was deported or whether he just went. But anyway, off he went to Australia. And no one had heard a thing about him for years and years. And just recently, Dennis Law and I were having a chat, and Dennis said, I've just come back from Australia, he said, and you'll never guess who I met. I said, who was that? He said, Frank Haffey. I said, I don't believe it. I said, he's living down in Australia. He said, yeah. I said, what did he say? He said, is it safe to come home yet, Dennis? I said, well, what did you say? He said, not yet, Frank, not yet. When I finished my time at the Steelworks, 21, finished. That was me. I couldn't get out of the place quick enough. And I went full-time with Motherwell on the princely sum of £16 a week. But it was just great to be a full-time player. Just get up in the morning, go to training, and it was just wonderful. And at the training then, we only had about half a dozen full-time players. But with some of the other lads who were part-time, might get off work and come up, and we'd have a little get the ball out, and we started doing our own little training things. And I think that's what got me into coaching later on in my career. We would use our imagination, and we had this young team at Motherwell. We had gone down to see the Real Madrid team training before the great 1960 European Cup final when they murdered Eintracht Frankfurt. And we went to see them training up at Kilmarnock's ground, and Di Stefano was a wonderful player, probably the greatest player ever. Ferenc Puskás, Del Sol, Hento. And they were all playing, and they were doing things with the ball at training which we'd never seen before. It was just magical. We sat and we watched them, and it was we were the only people there. We were the only other people from football that were there, because as young players, that particular team, the Motherwell team, we were into all that. We were into improvisation. We were into trying to do things that other teams couldn't do and other players couldn't do. And there were things getting done at that training session with the Real Madrid that we went away and practiced individual little skills they used to do, little things they would do, playing with each other, knocking the balls into each other, whatever. And we went away and practiced it. And I think it's one thing that sticks in my mind, how much we could learn from the great players around the world. So I'm enjoying playing with Motherwell, but my wife said to me, don't you think, you could move on from Motherwell? And really, she was a person behind it. I was quite happy with all my pals there, playing great football, really enjoying it, but she had more ambition than I had. And she thought, well, I could maybe go to England and get a better wage, better than a £16 a week. And so I asked the club for a transfer, and they turned me down. So I thought, well, that's me stuck here now. But Charlie Mitten, who was the manager of Newcastle United, came to see me, and it was an illegal tap, because you weren't allowed to do that. So Charlie came to my house one night and said, look, how about coming to Newcastle? And Newcastle were a big club then in the First Division, and so it was very tempting, and he talked money to me, and it was like a fortune compared to what I was getting at Motherwell. So he really had me going, and I put another transfer request in, and the club eventually said, okay, we'll grant your request. Well, the day that they said that, Bill Shankly got in a car from Liverpool, Mr. Reeks, who was to become the chairman, but he was only a director, Mr. Reeks, got in the car in his Rolls Royce and drove to Motherwell. And we were playing a game that night, local cup tie against, I think it was Hamilton Accies. And we played the game, and after it, I was introduced to Bill Shankly by our manager and said, this is Bill Shankly from Liverpool, and he wants to talk to you.
That's it from side one. Please wind to the end of the tape and turn over for more from Ian St John.